I want to thanks to LibreOffice community for giving me such an amazing opportunity to work on such an important task, which is adding the histogram support for in the LibreOffice code base. So, what is a histogram? Let's first begin with this. Histogram is basically a bar chart or a column chart with there is just a difference that we instead of having the digits we have some sort of a two things like binning or frequency, and binning is basically you are creating some boundaries or boxes, and those frequencies are basically the count how many objects fell into those boxes. That's it, that's all histogram is. Then there are two other things also, overflow and underflow bin. For example, if we have a range from 0 to 100 and we divided the bins to 0 to 10, 11 to 20 and so on, and we count those digits in under these bins. But what if our certain value or digit falls way ahead or way behind to our this common range? So in those cases, for example, if 0 to 100 is a range and we had 198 as a digit, so we might probably assign that as an overflow bin, and that point is going to be up there, not into this range. So what was the status before this GSoC 2024? It was a quite a bit requested feature, and Microsoft introduced this in 2016 along with histogram. There are a few other charts which we'll see later, and we also had to add support for those charts in future, but histogram was quite crucial, which could be seen from this CERN tutorial right here, where they were having a tutorial to guide their people, their new joinees, or anyone who wants to create a histogram, how to work with LibreOffice, where they were basically copying the bars in column chart and repeating till to mimic a histogram, which is quite painful. So that's why the histogram becomes more crucial to add as a feature. So how we begin our approach, we begin basically by copying the bar chart code, so to avoid more and more randomness in our entropy, which is the code base. And there's one problem where I learned, which I learned is I kept modifying the bar chart view in order to get it more aligned with what we want with histogram. But my mentor Thomas pointed out that we already have all the things for rendering for our view. We don't have to worry about that. What we have to worry about is binning and frequency. Remember, a histogram has that difference from our already existing bar chart. So for that, basically we ran into a problem because we now have to modify the axes, and we never did this in our code base. In our LibreOffice, we never had an opportunity where a particular chart type is modifying the both x and y axis, so we have to do that. And my mentor figured out a way where he used basically two files, where one is a data sequence, where we are managing those sequences. We are just arranging those in numerical or textual ways, like what sort of data we had, and then we interpreting those data later on, and then we sending this data to the calculation where we can calculate the basically how the bar should be shown. And there is one also interesting thing what my mentor did is we inherit from already existing bar chart code for the view, instead of copying and pasting the code again and modifying it according to our need, which we don't need it for the view because all we had to just render the bar. So we use the object oriented property of inheritance, and there is what we did, which is called the create shape, and further on it called the do z slot and do x slot, or those two other methods further on the side. So as you can see, the data interpreter code is here. It's basic data interpretation. I think we also had this for column line chart type, so it's sort of having those properties from there. Simple. For the beginning and the initial time, I modified when we were modifying the bar chart code. I set the cap rate to 0, and that's how it was looking at that time. Then we had to, after having those interpretation is done, we had to calculate the bars, and for the calculation we're using Scott rule because Microsoft is also using Scott rule, so we have to stick with that so the user can have interoperability between MS Office and LibreOffice, so they don't run into problem. And this is a formula for Scott normal reference, and that's what the code is doing basically. So you can find that about here at supportmicrosoft.com. There is a link, and you can see that calculation part has been modified and added in this particular PR. And that's what, after having that calculation as the formula, after that having that formula as the calculation, we started having bars which were visible, which were quite similar like Microsoft's one. And there's a little bit of tweak which we need to have, but that's okay. Then we have the spreadsheet compared with Google Sheet. Google Sheet is having a bit different formula, so that's why you're seeing a bit difference in binning and with frequency count. This makes sense. Then there is another crucial part was ODF and OOXML import and export. I ran into a big trouble here because our code base doesn't have the support for OOXML for these new chart types, because Microsoft introduced an entire namespace for this, and that was a painful thing to know at that very end time of the period of GSoC. And this is where I tried to open an XLX file which was created with Google Sheet, and that's how it was opening. It was creating a simple bar chart which we don't want here. And as you can see, I then created an XLS file with Microsoft Excel 2016 and onward, and you can see there is this message which is popping up, and that didn't make much sense. And so we started digging down into the newly created Excel sheet, which is basically the XLX file. It's a zip, basically it's a zip file. So we opened it as a zip file and started looking at each individual XML file which it had. And then there we can see the same message which we rendered here at previously when we open the XLX file with our newly created OXML support, which was hitting this, which means we don't have support for this new chart type namespace. And you can find about this up this link here, or also the Microsoft also had. So there's an entirely new chart namespace which was created by Microsoft, is Excel chart EX, so it's basically this, and what we had is chart X, not chart EX. So these are the new chart types which were introduced post 2016 MS Office, and these are the already existing chart type which we also have in our LibreOffice code base. So here's a difference. That's what actually created a problem. And then not just the basic already existing binning calculation which was done by Scott formula, we also had an option provided by Microsoft, is custom binning. So we also introduced that, and here is those images, and this is where those custom binning options are there. So if you select the check boxes, there is also a input box where you can input the overflow bin or underflow bin, and based on that you can have the calculation calculated. But we still don't have those calculations being calculated here, and that's still a problem which we are working. And the UI is prevalently working. It has the options for the custom binning, but it still have to manipulate those calculations behind at the back end. We still have to add ODF support for import and export. For OXML, we have to add an entire structure to parse it, to read it, and to write. So that's an entire additional work which we have to do, so that other new chart types can use this functionality well. So that's going to be a good thing which we had to do. Then Pareto chart is also left, which is basically is going to be pretty much a copy or replica of this already existing histogram chart. It's not going to be not that tough or challenging. And the remaining new chart types also needs to be introduced. So that's all what we had in this, and that's all I did. So thank you for having this opportunity and giving me this opportunity, and I really enjoyed working here, and I have to complete this remaining task. Remaining thing could be found here in more detail with the mails and everything on the blog, and that's what it is. Thanks.